So I've been thinking a lot about the implications of adding ads to all of these large language AI models that we have nowadays. I'm talking Chat-GPT, Anthropic, Google Gemini. And the more I thought about it, the more disturbing the picture looked to me. So I just wanted to make this video to kind of talk about what some of these implications are going to be before this happens, and maybe some possible solutions. So this video is going to be a little different than what I would normally make, but I think it's an important conversation that we all need to have, especially if you're using one of these large language learning models. Now, no doubt you've heard the term that when a product is free, then you are the product. This goes along with the concept of like a free lunch, that there's no such thing as a free lunch, that if these platforms are being offered for free, then there's some other avenue or way that they can really make a lot of money off of you. And more recently, what we've really seen that is it's capturing your data and then basically using that data to sell products, whether that's selling the data to third parties or other people who can then market to you, or just using that to run better ads for people that come onto the platform. Now, since the dawn of the internet, most of the companies that didn't start out with an ads-based model have shifted towards it. Think Google, Facebook, any of the top players on it. Their main revenue is an ad-based revenue. They make the majority of their money by servicing ads to people that use their platform. And it seems more and more clear that the most valuable asset that's coming around this time is your personal data. And a long time ago, I really thought my personal data doesn't seem that important. I mean, what's the real harm? I mean, a lot of my personal info is out there. Like, sure, obviously identity theft or those normal things are big concerns, but barring from those things, what's really the big deal if these companies have a little more data on me or not? And the more I dug in this, the more I kind of realized where these problems that we currently have and where future problems are going to mainly lie. So if you don't really understand targeted ads, here's basically how it's worked for a long time. Your phone or computer, when you go online, has something called cookies. And if that's enabled, then it basically has a unique ID for you, and it can track all the things that you do on the web. Now, cookies are helpful because it's kind of like memory for the web. It's kind of like if you go on a site, you don't have to tell it who you are every single time. It kind of you can pick up a little bit more or less where you left off to some degree. So between cookies that are on your personal devices and these certain platforms, which just become better and better at collecting all of this information about you, Facebook, Google, if you're logged in, they're keeping a record of all the different things you search, all the different posts you look at, the ones you read, the ones you like. That's kind of just the tip of the iceberg, that now with AI, all this data that was just too much to actually sort through and wasn't that helpful before now has become much more enriching because they can use AI to actually make it more useful. And what's the point of having a bunch of data if you can't actually infer things from that data, right? And what I've realized more with all these top AI models is that it's kind of like cookies, where now they have something called unified memory. And I think kind of the next step on top of all this stuff that I'm talking about is using these models and the model's ability to remember all the things that you've talked to them and asked them before. I mean, memory in these models is kind of one of the things that made it most helpful, is because you could type in a bunch of information and these models would all kind of remember the conversations you had with them, and you wouldn't have to retell it a bunch of stuff. Kind of like cookies. You wouldn't have to start from a fresh start every time. When you use it, you could then basically, it can remember everything, which is very helpful. But now the problem with this is the amount of detailed data that these sites are collecting on you is just so much greater and granular and specific than any of these other sites before. Because think about it, Facebook, Google, all these big sites, like they're getting snippets of stuff. They're seeing the things that you look at, things that you're asking about, like general questions. But a lot of times with these new AI models, people are like talking with them. They're having a conversation. They're sharing deep feelings and insights and personal information that you never would have shared with a Google search engine before. I mean, just for perspective, I've asked ChatGPT quite a few questions that involve my two kids. And you realize that as you go along, you ask other things, it remembers your kid's name, it remembers how old they are. It's kind of almost like keeping up with your conversation, which I think a lot of times we just don't think about how creepy that kind of really is. Like it's creepy. It's creepy that these AI models are basically storing all this personal information, detailed stuff about your entire family, and basically creating a profile on you. Now, as of this, these AI models don't have targeted ads on their platforms yet. No doubt they will, probably within this next year. And so some of the most targeted platforms for this has been Facebook. I mean, think about Facebook. It has some of the most personal information about any person, and it can target well beyond just demographics, like whether you're male or female or what age you are. It can literally target things based on your interests, based on conversations you have, posts you looked at. All that information now can be used to implement a much more specific target of an ad towards you. I was just listening to Gary Vee's new Day Trading Attention book, and he talks a lot about how rather than just targeting these broad general demographics on Facebook, how you could run a Facebook campaign, you could target almost as specific as 32 to 35-year-old dads who live in the Seattle area who own a Vespa, something like that. Like you can get very granular. You can get down to the shows or interests that they have, and you can infer lots more data than you would normally be able to based off of this. So now we take that already super targeted personal information like Facebook, and if we move it over to ChatGPT, the level of insight and granular detail that it has on every single person is 10 times that. It's way more information than it's had before. I actually remember having this realization about Facebook and going back and unliking all the different interests and topics and stuff that I'd liked way back in the 8th grade. It shows you how long I've been on Facebook. But I was just realizing that just all of these things like random movies or different interests that I had put that I liked on Facebook, it was using all that data to create a profile on me. And I just didn't feel right with that. So if you move just even beyond the more basic form of what Facebook targeted ads looks like, and you move towards ChatGPT for when they roll out ads, not if, but when, these are probably going to be the most specific and invasive ads that we've ever seen. And so let me just talk about the 3 different levels and areas of how this could potentially be a problem in the future. So on its most basic level, it's usually to sell you a product. And this is basically to influence your decision. So you're searching for something and then it pops up an ad about a certain brand from a product in that category that you're looking for. That's on its most basic level. But what we've already seen before is how usually the main abuse from this comes from third parties buying and taking our personal data and then using it in more nefarious ways. There's been quite a bit of data about how third parties have used that and influenced even when it comes to elections by serving very targeted specific ads to very specific people on Facebook. And then of course, this could even just be influencing your opinion, influencing a more holistic opinion on how you have on different policies and things that are happening. So really more than just your shopping preferences, all the different data they're collecting can really be used to influence our thoughts on different things very specifically. That's where you see definitely a little bit more of this nefariousness coming out. Now, I think the next level gets more into the predictive source. Is a lot of people are using these kind of to share how they're feeling, their emotions, that kind of stuff. You start to get to these areas where kind of these models can start to predict when people are in a vulnerable place. Maybe they know when they're vulnerable more financially or emotionally, and they could actually potentially use some of this extra data to target very specifically to influence you when you're in vulnerable situations. Now, that already is just a horrible thing. Is that's like taking advantage of someone who's in a tight spot. Now, of course, I'm not saying that these platforms are doing that. It's just there's really quite the opportunity to do that, whether it's through the platform somehow or even more likely third parties to use some of this data to influence you at these really vulnerable times. I think this last one that I was thinking about kind of bugs me the most. Maybe that second one is kind of more of a big deal for you. It's a big deal for me too, but I feel like this third one, talking about price discrimination. You probably heard some of the stuff about dynamic pricing, where basically sites or stores are able to change the price based on the information that they collect from someone. There was actually a really interesting More Perfect Union video where they had a bunch of people buy the same items and they saw how there was a range, sometimes $1 to $2 from these different products. And basically, depending on different information they collected from people, they were able to say, oh, we can charge more because maybe they know that someone has more money, so they're more likely and willing to buy something if they have more. Or this person doesn't, so therefore they know that they need to offer it at a lower price, so it'll make it more likely that that person will actually purchase the item. And this has already been around for a while. I mean, if you had your VPN and you were coming from a poorer country, that if you looked up flight prices, you would often get a cheaper price if you're coming from that country based on the US. Like this was something that you could literally use a VPN and you could get different airline prices based on the country that you're searching for, which is crazy. Like this has been around for a while, but I think there's going to be just another level that these AI systems could take it to when it comes to this dynamic pricing based on how much income you make, on your demographic, on your age, on so many different things. It's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a big problem. So what can you do? I mean, am I going to stop using all these AI systems because of this thing? No, I think a lot of people are still going to use these products because there's so much value and use that can be derived from them. But what can we do when it comes to these? Well, I think for this video, I think one of the main things is just find ways that you can talk through these different things, but don't go to an AI chatbot and give them all this deep personal information about where you're at in the moment. I think for a lot of people, and this sounds so basic, I think even just writing in an old-fashioned journal is so helpful. You really don't need to use these chatbots like a therapist. You really probably shouldn't. Actually, don't do that. It's probably one of the most frustrating things about using these different AI things. It's just how much they just literally just tell you what you want to hear. And there's even been a bunch of videos about AI psychosis, tons of interesting videos so far that have surfaced about people showing how it's like the AI kind of drove them into bad mental states. Just so much more cause for alarm just in that. That's a whole separate topic. And there's even options when it comes to downloading parts of these models and using them offline. This is how the government even uses some of these different Chat-GPT models. I've heard that they have their basically whole offline model, so it's not connected, it's not sending all this data back and forth. That'd be really bad. That is at least a safer way to do that. There's other videos that you can look up that talk about how to do that. And I think just the biggest thing about this is just the awareness. I think we just need to have these conversations so people are just more aware of what's happening with their personal data. I actually made another video talking about another huge threat that I felt AI imposed to us that not many people are talking about. And you can check that video out right here. And as always, we'll see you next time, fam.